Good evening and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm your host, Kim Todd. We've got another really great show for you tonight as we answer all those gardening questions. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you dial 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. Our toll-free number is 1-800-676-5446. If your question can wait, you can send us an email with a picture attached as a JPEG to byf@unl.edu. And we really do need to know where you live. Give us as much information as you can so we can give you a good answer to that question. Backyard Farmer is also available on all our social media sites, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Pinterest. So you dial, and while you're doing that, we will take a look at some samples. And Jody, you have a comparison thing for us.
Yes, so the last time I was here in July, I brought a monarch caterpillar. And it's hard to compare and contrast when you don't have both in front of you. And this has been all the talk in the garden lately because anyone who's got parsley or dill or fennel growing on their porch probably just have swallowtail caterpillars growing on their porch. But if you can see here, I've got some smaller, younger caterpillars. When they're younger, they're black and they've got these white saddles, kind of disguised like bird poop. And then as they get older, they're greener and they've got black bands and then yellow spots. And so you can see a variety and they start growing. They do like those plants that are herbs to us. So parsley, fennel, and dill, if that's what you want. And when they grow up, they become these beautiful black butterflies with yellow spots, and they're black swallowtails, so they've got the tails at the end. And then they've got some blue as well. You can tell a female because there's more blue. Okay, so over here we've got the monarch, and you can see they've got the yellow, white, and black transverse bands. Oh, this one's trying to get away. But what's different is that they've got these two sets of these feelers kind of in the back and in the front. And so they are feeders of milkweed. So honeyvine milkweed, swamp milkweed, butterfly milkweed, common milkweed, those are all host plants for them. A lot of times we worry that they've been eaten by birds, but really when they're ready to pupate, they move away from the host plant, so that's good to know. If you were interested in rearing them, it's good to put a cage. I've been trying it free range and it doesn't work. But I have to mention that these pupa are brown and they camouflage into the surroundings, so you might have to look really hard to find them. And these ones, they walk away, but they will also, we were talking earlier, Kim and I, they make these beautiful little pots that are green with gold flecks and a beautiful gold trim. They kind of remind me of like a magic lamp. But these turn into our monarchs that we love to see fly through our garden as they migrate.
Perfect. Thanks, Jody, and it's good to see the comparison between the two. Okay, Bill, we have from you quite...
Where'd my sample go? It's missing. No, so this is a great time of year to start seeding our cool season grasses, and so to make sure we're doing it appropriately, we have to make sure we have the right seeder. And so today I brought in a larger sample that it's on the floor. It is a drop spreader. This is different than your rotary spreader that you might use to put down fertilizer. The reason we want to use this is our seed is pretty light, and in Nebraska, it's kind of windy occasionally. And so if we use one of those rotary spreaders, first of all, it doesn't even throw the seed very far to begin with. So having a drop seeder, the seed then drops down nice and cleanly and goes into the soil. And so the thing that's important there is we have to make sure we overlap our wheels so we don't get little skips between the applications. So if we're going to seed, you'll make the investment in getting a drop seeder. You're going to do all that work. You're prepared to seed. If you put in a rotary seeder, you're going to have a really hard time getting that grass to look good and become established. Other tips: use a starter fertilizer, mulch with anything you can to kind of keep some moisture there. And then if you seed with that drop spreader, if you come back over with like an aerator, a core aerator, or even a lawn power rake after you seed, that actually pushes that seed into the soil. So we get good seed to soil contact and a much better chance of having a successful lawn. So those are just some tips for fall seeding.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. All right, Kyle, people are really tired of you and your tomato diseases.
Well, it's my fault this week.
Yeah, this is blame John.
John brought this.
And I don't like tomatoes, so I love to see them looking sick like this. So yeah, today John actually brought me some tomato viruses that we have. And one of the things with we have a lot of viruses that cause these yellow splotches on tomatoes. There are tomato spotted wilt is one, and tomato ring spot virus is another one. Both of them are vectored by thrips. And as far as control in the greenhouse or in your garden, sanitation is by far going to be your best friend. So as soon as you see any of these fruits start to show up, it's probably not a bad idea to remove that entire plant. If one fruit on the plant's infected, that entire plant is infected. And I don't know if you can see closely on here though, but I think this is tomato ring spot because we do have a few of these concentric rings in the middle of this splotchy yellowness. Again, does that matter as much if it's ring spot versus spotted wilt? Not a whole lot, but they are important when choosing varieties for next season. As far as eating these tomatoes, they would be fine to eat. One of the issues is they don't ripen evenly. So as you can see on these, we have some green spots and some red, yellow, all sorts of different levels of ripeness. Fine to eat, just might taste a little bit funky.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Something else to eat on your end of the table, John, or
Right.
not.
I thought we would spice it up tonight. So I brought a collection of hot peppers. And I have to thank one of our master gardeners in our Douglas Sarpy County office, Helen. She's a purveyor of hot peppers. And these are all America Selections winners. So if you come to the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're a All America Selection display garden. I actually have an All-America Selection test garden, which is very interesting. So these are winners throughout several different years. So starting with this little guy, was a winner back in 1988. And this is called Mexibel. And it has a little bit of heat to it. So it looks like a little mini bell pepper, but don't be confused. It will light you up. So it's not one of those little snacking lunchbox peppers. The next one is from 2015. And this is Flaming Flare. It's a Fresno-style chili, and Fresnos are hard to grow in most places that aren't hot and dry, but this one actually tested well all across the U.S., so if you want to give that one a try. In 2017, it was Mad Hatter, and I love the shape of this pepper. So it's a nice hot pepper there, interesting flavor. And then these two actually were ones that I tested out last year in our garden. And loved both of them. So this is a Cayenne. This one is Red Ember, and that was a winner from 2018. And then this one is a habanero pepper called Roulette. And so a lot of people love habanero for the heat and for the sweet fruity flavor. So you can just kind of snack on it.
Without setting yourself on fire.
The nice thing about this habanero is that it's a new variety that's heatless. So it has the fruity flavor.
I was waiting.
Right, I got them. Like they all looked at me in horror as
I
I'm
knew,
like
but
chowing
I
down.
knew.
So I'm chowing down on this habanero pepper. But it actually has that sweet, fruity flavor that people like in the habanero, but it's actually totally sweet. So
Wonderful.
You can give that a try. It's Roulette.
All right, thanks, John. Okay, we're going to go to picture questions first, and you have a couple that are really fun. Jody, the first here is, what is eating the leaves of my black currant? And this one is what?
This is a gorgeous caterpillar. It's actually Jonathan Larson's favorite insect. Fun fact. So this is Cecropia moth caterpillar. So this is going to grow up into a moth, but this caterpillar is huge. It could be up to like 4 inches, and it's got these orange and yellow and blue knobs. Gorgeous. It turns into a giant moth that it's hard to explain if you don't have the picture, but it reminds me of like red velvet. Very furry, big body, can be like 4 to 6 inches like wingspan, and it's got these crescent moons on the wings. Yes, absolutely beautiful.
Perfect. And then I think your second is actually a moth on a window. What's that?
Yeah,
this
so
is
this
Sioux
is
City, Iowa.
Another moth, beautiful. This is a Luna moth, and yeah, they've got these tails on their hind wings, and they've got these transparent eye spots on each of the 4 wings. Absolutely beautiful. Pale green. They're attracted to lights, and they come out after midnight to mate. So if they're still there in the morning, you get to see them.
Perfect.
Beautiful, beautiful pictures.
Thanks, Jody. All right. Not so beautiful.
No. Not as beautiful.
So, this particular viewer let his lawn grow a little longer than usual. He thinks this is quack grass, and how does he get rid of it? And it kind of goes with another one that his yard was fine, but then got weeds out of control.
Yep.
And what should be done
This
about
could be the
this?
Nebraska state grass this time of year. This is just crabgrass.
Right.
Has those big seed heads. You can tell it's not a quackgrass for a lot of reasons, but one of the telltales when it's that tall is that really wispy kind of seed head that you get that forms on the different quackgrass species. There's other ways you can tell they're different. Honestly, there's nothing we want to really do chemically at this point. They are so mature and healthy that you're not going to be able to do anything with them. You could spray them over and over and over, which you don't recommend, and you're not going to really make a dent on them. Mother Nature is coming, and she will kill them when the frost comes. So all I can say for now is just keep them mowed to try to minimize that seed bank, and then next year, make sure you do a pre-emergence product. And if it's really bad like this, maybe doing a split application, you do one generally typical timing and then one in June, and that gets anything that might have happened. We think this year, with it being so hot in May, we didn't get as long of control as we normally got from our pre-emergence herbicides.
All right, thanks, Bill. Yours is also not very beautiful this time, I'm afraid, Kyle.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, this is a person with a big oak with a large darkened spot. Can this be saved? So looking at that dark stuff.
Yeah, that's unfortunately not a whole lot to do for this tree right now, except for start planning for its replacement. You know, anytime we have that much area of the trunk taken up by a canker or just some black discoloration like we have there, chances are that injury's been going on, occurred a while ago, and that tree is not too long for this world. And also on some of those pictures, you could even see some of the bark that was starting to slough off as well. Just another sign that it's not a healthy tree. I would recommend planting a replacement tree and really keeping an eye on that, as it could easily become a nuisance tree and cause some damage.
All right, thanks, Kyle. So we had a couple viewers actually ask this question, John, more of a curiosity than anything.
Okay.
But why do some of her cucumbers turn out with this one weird end on them? She says they taste great. And what happens there?
To me, that actually looks like some incomplete pollination going on. So whenever we, you know, to get the fruit of those different plants, we have to have an insect pollinator. And all of the different parts of the female flower have to be pollinated. And so it could be that we had something that limited that pollination. So it could have been not enough pollinators during the time. It could have been heat, other weather stressors. So it could be any of those numbers of things.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Well, we have had a few cooler days this week in eastern Nebraska, and that means it's time to start planning to bring those plants you set out on the patio back indoors for the fall and the winter. You can't just set them inside, expect them to survive. Here's a process and how to do that. Here is Extension Assistant Scott Evans.
Now's the time of the year when we need to start preparing our houseplants that have spent the summer on the patio to bring them indoors for the winter. Yes, it's still warm outside, but we can start taking steps now to ease that transition from outside to inside. One of the first things that we can do is take a good hard look at our plants and scout for any harmful insects. Spider mites, whitefly, and aphids like to hang out on the back side of the leaves, so start flipping those leaves over and see if you notice any of them. If you do, take that hose and just wash them off. Some of our more challenging insects, such as mealybugs, soft-shelled scale, and the adult whitefly, might benefit from 1 or 2 applications of insecticidal soap. But a word of caution about insecticidal soap: some plants might be sensitive to it, so check that label before you apply it. Then we need to start acclimating our plants to some lower light situations. What you can do is take them off the patio and put them underneath the canopy of the tree, where they're going to receive maybe half-day sunlight. Leave them there for about 14 days and then just gradually move them into some darker shade. This is going to make that transition from outside to inside easier for those plants. The next thing that we want to do is start checking up, monitoring the weather. houseplants are tropical in origin, so there might be damage once we start getting below 50, but that's not the case for all of our plants. Some plants such as the fiddleleaf fig and the peace lily can go down to 45 degrees. Other plants like the Boston fern can take 40. No-fork allen pine, hibiscus, and croton can go down to 35 degrees, and Kintia palm and the schefflera can take 32 degrees without damage. Then when we start bringing those plants in, we need to take into consideration the light value that they're going to need. They're going to need to be placed in windows that will support them. Some plants like the schefflera are going to do best in the southwest facing window. Other plants like the spider plant will take the southeast or even east facing window. And Boston ferns are going to do very well in areas like the northeast or in spaces that don't receive necessarily direct sunlight, but some good bright light. We also want to make sure that we have any accessories on hand, such as plant caddies, drip trays, so that way we don't damage any of our flooring, and grow lights for any of those plants that need good bright light. So if we start taking steps now, we can take that transition from outside to inside and make it a little bit easier for our plants, and they're going to be much happier.
If you follow that procedure, you really should have a good chance of having those plants survive that move indoors. Also, don't forget to check for passengers, Jody, before you finally set them aside. And we're going to the second set of picture questions, Jody, starting with what's bugging my kale? Pure and simple, that's all she asked. And it is clearly an insect that is just munching away on that disgusting vegetable.
Yeah, so it's actually a really pretty stink bug called the harlequin bug. And yeah, they like kale, cauliflower, broccoli, all those types of plants. Right now, picking them off would probably be the best thing. Next year, maybe floating row covers or insecticidal soap or sanitation, though, for the garden this fall.
All right, perfect. And we have a fly flying around, just in case you wonder what we're doing. This is the second Just a Simple ID on this one, Jody.
Okay, that is a two-spotted tree cricket.
That's it? Okay, a cricket.
It's usually up in the trees. It's not going to bother anything.
Perfect. All right, Bill, you have... we have a third one. I forgot
Bill.
This one. This is the one that's interesting. It might be in your turf, but it's in the bathroom. So hopefully your turf is not in the bathroom. Okay. What is this?
So this is actually, had a lot of calls at our office about this. This is called the foreign grain beetle. And it is a pest in houses, so they sometimes call it the new house beetle. So when the house is under construction and the walls are open and it rains, the weather, a lot of moisture gets trapped in there. So when they close up the house, the adult beetles will lay eggs there, and then after the house is closed up and the homeowners live there for a year, then they start coming out of the woodwork. And no insecticide recommended, just sweep them up. It should really be temporary, not more than 1 year, but it's late summer, early fall.
All right, thanks, Jody. This is yours, Bill. This does look a little bit like turf. Fine-bladed fescue. He thinks he has a fungus. He also thinks he has a lack of water with incorrect placement of sprinkler heads. And then I think we have some pictures of the blades themselves, perhaps.
So yeah, the first picture here, this is definitely a fine fescue, and this is what happens with a lot of fine fescues, especially in eastern Nebraska. Fine fescue likes to keep its feet dry, well-drained soils. We have high clay soils, we have humidity, we have rainfall, and so we can get a lot of different diseases like crown rust or crown rot, excuse me. The Pythium blights just annihilate it. But then also chinch bug is an insect pest that can be a big problem with fine fescues. And then here you have a kind of a diversity of grasses there. So the really skinny one is your fine fescue, but then those thicker ones, those are tall fescue. You can tell by the mid veins are really prominent. And if you look closely at those, they're very typical markings and margins of brown patch, which is very common on that grass right now. So if you're running out the fine fescues, it's kind of send it over to the lab, and he'll be able to tell you exactly what it is, so you use the right control strategy and management strategy to minimize that next year.
All right, thanks, Bill. All right, Kyle, I'm afraid we still have some tomatoes. This is Roma's to start with, and some blotches going on. And then we have one from North Platte, one began to wilt and completely collapsed. So what do we do this time of year for either of these?
Again, we have a couple of viruses that are, well, not a couple of viruses, but some sort of virus that is causing these issues. Really not a whole lot to do as far as control-wise this time of year. Early in the season, if you are seeing some thrips, some insects around, maybe you can try to control those thrips as they do vector these, they do vector the viruses. However, anytime you're controlling for the thrips, you want to make sure you're not harming some of our pollinators as well. Really, with these romas, if you're okay with the color, I'd say go ahead and eat them. They should be just fine. As far as that whole tomato plant that is collapsing, just get it out of the garden now and save the water.
All right, thanks, Kyle. All right, and that's the collapsing tomato right there. I think all of us have some this time of year.
Yes, I have 2.
Perfect, or not. All right, John, so we have a couple of trees showing what appears to be herbicide damage. The first is a mulberry in Franklin County, and the second one is a catalpa in Ogallala. What do you think as a horticulturist?
Yeah, that symptom of the cupping leaves, so we see the edges curl in on themselves like that. Whenever we see it all around the margin like that, that is a symptom of, I think, herbicide drift. Probably there are a few culprits that can do that. It's probably knowing what is being used in the area, probably dicamba, but it also could be 2,4-D. Those classes of chemicals, those are things that can cause that. If it were just heat related, like the whole leaf would sort of just roll up and try to protect its surface, but that weird cupping is the herbicide drift.
All right, thank you, John. Well, you know, it has been a beautiful season out in our garden. Our flowers are putting on a show. We have been fortunate to donate several hundreds of pounds of produce, some of it, unfortunately, to the squash bugs. Let's take a minute to see what's happening out in our backyard farmer garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're continuing to harvest all of our produce. Okra, peppers, beans, squash, tomatoes, all producing fantastically. The pounds to donate from Produce from the Heart to go to the local food banks and pantries here in the East Campus area, so we're really excited about that. The flowers are looking fantastic. All the rain that we've had this week is really going to help and make them pop and extend them into the fall season. The one thing that we did have to do in the garden this week is pull out some cabbages, some cauliflower, some of those Brassicaceae plants, just because they just really weren't looking very good anymore. We also had to pull out some of our summer squash and zucchinis. The squash bug has just annihilated them. We didn't want them in our garden anymore, so we took them out and sent them off to the compost bin, as far away from the garden as possible. So stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden, check it out, and see what's happening this week.
Yes, we did have to tear a few plants out due to those nasty squash bugs, Jody.
Why do they look
But don't let that stop you from taking a visit. Our garden is fabulous this year with lots of great plants to see, and insects, of course.
You could snack on a roulette habanero.
You could, or not. All right, so we have a couple of quick IDs on this one. That's what is it? One is Grand Island, backside of a monarch leaf. Jody, what do we think this was?
So milkweed right now is not
Milkweed
looking
leaf.
that great.
Yeah.
A lot of, it's just weathering, and the aphid honeydew turns kind of mold. It's called a city mold from aphids.
Okay, that's all that one is. And then the second one, I think, is Omaha, Midtown Omaha. Backyard, good guy, bad guy, congregating on those coneflowers as they've been doing all season.
I actually had these too. These are the Gorgon checker spot butterfly caterpillar. So they're bad at this stage, but it should have only been like maybe those 2 leaves. And then they probably are gone by now. They seem to just disappear, but they'll turn into beautiful butterflies.
All right, Bill, a couple for you too, and they're weed related, and they're both, this has taken over our yard, what to do about it. The first is Bennington. The second is, and that one's what?
That's ground ivy, creeping Charlie, favorite.
And the second is
Violets.
wild violets.
So both of these are are grasses or weeds that come into more shady environments. And so the problem is you don't have a strong lawn there. If you had a stronger lawn, then you wouldn't have these problems. They're both perennials, so if we do need to try to control them, to get it cleaned up, you want to use something with triclopyr in it later on this fall. And then next year, really try to promote good, healthy turf. And if it's really shady, overseed with some tall fescue this fall too. It's a really shade-tolerant grass variety.
All right, thanks, Bill. Okay, Kyle, this is a lilac tree planted 7 years ago in Blair. She was going to plant another, but she noted this odd wilt pattern going on, just a few of the branches, full sun. She does use her automatic irrigation to run it about every other day, but she wonders what the wilt is.
Yeah, well, these pictures, we can't really tell what the wilt is just from these pictures alone. It could be a few things. Water is one of the big culprits. If you're just using your lawn sprinkler, you might not be getting adequate water coverage for it. There are a couple of diseases that can cause that wilt as well. Phytophthora is one, and then there's also a bacterial disease that can take a lilac branch and kill the whole branch too. Regardless of if it is one of those diseases or if it is just a sickly branch, go ahead and just prune that entire branch out, and it should be okay.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Okay, John, we have gobs of globs appearing on plums in Omaha and in plums in Norfolk. What is this stuff called and what to do about it?
It's just a plum problem, right? It's just so a lot of the stone fruits like plums, peaches, those kinds of things, they will exude lots of sap from any damage that they get on them, and we call it gummosis. So it could be from any number of damages on the trunk. It could be from insect damage. It could even be cracking from weather like too much rain, or even like sun damage, sun scald, something like that can cause some damage. So keep a lookout to see what the damage might be. There's really no treatment unless you see something else going on with the tree. It just happens.
Are you ready, gentlemen and lady?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. John.
I might win this week, I don't know.
Okay,
we'll try.
Perfect. Let's do it. Planting blackberries next to black raspberries, does that affect the flavor?
That should not. There should not be any crossing with that.
All right, from Gothenburg, why do English people call lindens limes?
Oh, you just have to throw weird ones in, don't you? So it's actually from Middle English. So lind was the word for wood, and so there's some derivation in there, but linden became an adjective to mean wooden or of the lime tree.
Perfect. So when should wine and roses and other weigelias be pruned?
In the spring after they flower.
All right. How do you remove poison ivy that's growing up a tree, and the tree will be removed?
So if you're going to remove the tree, you can use one of the glyphosate or Roundup products that's for poison ivy or for woody plants or shrubs.
All right. Mums are in the garden centers right now. How late do we wait before we put them in the ground if we try to hold them?
I would try to get them in as early as possible just to let them get established.
All right. Nice job. I know, that fly is just... Jody, where's your fly swatter? Okay, are you ready, Kyle?
Of course.
Okay, so we have several people who want to know whether it's fall solarization works to kill soil-borne pathogens.
Depends on the pathogen, also depends on what you're using to solarize. So make sure that you are using the correct type of plastic for that.
All right. We have a person who has 1 peony out of 8, all the same variety, planted close together. One is showing powdery mildew, the others are not. What's up with that?
There's just a little bit more humidity right around that one, so a bit of a microclimate. I'd go ahead and remove that, a little bit more spacing. The powdery mildew should go away then.
All right. Do we recommend a fungicide to get rid of mushrooms in lawns?
No.
All right. We have a couple people with black stems and leaves on their clematis. Do they remove the plant or just remove the black stuff and hope for better conditions next year?
It's getting to the time of year where you could probably go ahead and remove that entire plant.
All right. Do we put these tomato plants and fruits that we've been talking about with all these viruses in the compost?
If it's a virus, yes, they will break down in the compost.
All right. You ready,
Tied
Bill?
you.
Oh, you just had to time. You can't let me win.
You ready?
I'm gonna win.
Okay. We'll see. Will quinclorac hurt our ornamental grasses?
Consult your label. I don't think so, but it depends. There's too many ornamental grasses. I don't want to say broadly over all of them.
All right. Is there any way to permanently rid a lawn of crabgrass? And this is a Western Iowa question.
Not permanently. Those seeds last like 10 years in the soil, so they're pretty persistent.
All right. What is it time to treat for sandburrs and puncture vine? This comes to us from the north.
Yeah, because those are warm season perennials, and so the sandburrs. Well, the sandburrs you could go out with like a Pilex, and that would be something you want to do this time of year.
All right. When do we put fall fertilization down, and what percentage of N?
You know, the percent N doesn't really matter. You'd rather get that down, probably about now into September. And if your lawn needs a little bit more, if it's a newer lawn, poor soil, I wouldn't go much past mid to late October, or mid to early to mid October. I'm not going to win. And don't go to Halloween. That's just too late.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Charles.
4. I'm sorry. I just can't speak. I'm just terrible.
Are you ready?
Yes.
We have a viewer who asked if geraniums will rid a garden of Japanese beetles.
No.
Okay. We have, since EAB has been discovered in Lincoln, should ashes be treated now?
No. This is not the right time. Wait for spring.
All right. Will wood mulch around a house attract ants?
No. It may provide harborage, though. See, I'm being too vague. But, don't pile it up and don't get it too wet.
All right. Are there bees that actually guard a bee if other bees approach when they're in a flower?
Yes, and it happens very often with solitary bees.
All right. The white moths have taken over Gosper County, according to one viewer. Should they be treated?
No, because the moths will not do any damage. The caterpillars were the woolly bears, and they're no longer caterpillars. They're beautiful moths.
All right. We have a North Platte viewer who wants to know how in the world to prevent Japanese beetles next year.
You can do a systemic treatment on some of the shrubs that are in the label.
All right. Nice job. The insect person wins, but she still hasn't killed that darn fly.
No.
Right now.
Yeah, all those yes, no
Don't have the
questions.
right
I don't know
choice.
what to say about that.
Okay, John, you have beautiful large plants of the week. What do we have this week?
So I have a silver dollar hydrangea here. It's a lovely fragrant hydrangea. It's a panicle type, and it's a smaller flower. And you notice the pink and the white there, so it's a very, very beautiful. It's a woody plant, so it's a nice woody hydrangea for your garden. And then we also have the meadow liatris, which is this big, tall, spiky thing here. So it has huge flower heads. It's about 4 feet tall, and it has these wonderful little pom-poms all along. It's a very beautiful little plant. It actually works in wet conditions, and it's in the rain garden here at the Backyard Farmer Garden, and butterflies love it. So we'll send it down to Jody, and she can have it for her butterflies. There you go.
Perfect. And she can hit the fly with it,
Right,
too.
yes.
Let's hit
It's a
that
fly
fly.
swatter. There we go.
All right, so we have picture questions next, gang. This is an interesting one, Jody. This is a viewer who saw this. She's in Lincoln. She saw this on a dwarf canna, these eggs. She wonders what they might be. Any idea on that one?
Yes. I don't know the species, but it is a type of moth. So it's moth eggs. So they'll come out as caterpillars, and caterpillars are generally going to eat plants. So if you don't want your plant eaten, I would just take scissors and cut that little
Cut the piece out.
clusters out.
That's a really good idea. Excellent. All right, so Bill, this is a Western Iowa, Crawford County viewer. This has come up in their yard for the first time ever. Wants to know what it is called. It has sort of a woody or a large stem, deep root system, and of course, what will get it out of the lawn.
Yeah, so that's a little, or like just our small ragweed. There's lots of different types of ragweed. And the ones that we see in the lawn usually are this little ragweed. It's an annual. It's a taproot like you saw. You can pull it. I'd probably recommend that. I don't know if I would actually treat that one right now as it being an annual. And again, it's probably there because there was that hole in your lawn to begin with. And so trying to minimize that and have a good dense lawn is going to be the best path forward for that guy.
All right, excellent. And don't breathe in.
Yeah, it
takes
kicks my butt, that's for sure, yeah.
All right, so you have a couple of pictures here, Kyle. We actually had a sample of this one on air, but this comes to us from Spirit Lake, Iowa. Silver maple. She wonders what this is, and is there anything to do about it right now?
Yeah, so that's a great picture of tar spot. Again, we pathologists find these beautiful pictures beautiful. But yeah, so tar spot tar spot can affect quite a few different types of trees out there. Typically in early June, you'll start to see maybe a couple of really small black dots on there, but then as the season goes on, they grow and converge into these larger blotches that do literally look like a piece of tar on the leaf. And as far as control, typically in a landscape situation, there's not much that we recommend aside from fall sanitation. So when those leaves drop, go ahead and make sure that you're shredding them with the mower. You can compost those leaves, just make sure that you do flip the compost pile before using it. As far as applying a fungicide, it's not the best idea because if your neighbor has a maple and he doesn't spray a fungicide, then you're not going to get any sort of control. So sanitation will be your best bet.
All right, and you had another interesting blotchy thing. This is a Fremont viewer that had a red bud planted just last year. Got this sort of blotchiness a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, this is curious to say the least. It asked around and really not sure what's going on. There are a few leaf spots the red buds can get. I'd be curious to actually look at a sample. So if you'd be willing to submit a sample to the diagnostic clinic, we would love to take one to try to figure out what exactly is going on with that plant.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Okay, you have a couple interesting ones too, John. The first is actually a lemon tree. Didn't get the best of care, puts it on the patio. She does use a Miracle-Gro on it, but it's starting to show this yellowish leaf discoloration. She's wondering what that is, and should she try to trim that off?
So I think it's a nutrient issue, and I actually have a lime tree in my office that does this too. So I think that interveinal chlorosis means that the plant isn't getting enough nutrients. And the one thing that you have to know about citrus is that they actually are heavy feeders on some things that don't come in the normal like plant fertilizers. So they need the micronutrients iron, manganese, and molybdenum, I think, is one of them. So all those things you learned in 7th grade science class in the periodic table and you want to try to forget. So you actually should buy a specific citrus fertilizer, and they have those in there. So I finally did that, and it's slowing down now.
All right, and I think your second one here is also yellow. This is an oak, and this is in Lexington, 14 years old.
Yeah, so that is also a nutrient deficiency. What I would suggest for that is actually to do some soil testing to see exactly what it is. We don't like to make blanket recommendations about, just throw something at it and it'll work. So it could be a few different things, could be nitrogen, could be iron. So have some soil tested and see what it is and treat accordingly.
All right, and it could also be all that rain in Lexington.
And all the rain we have actually washes out nutrients and also actually damages roots so the plant can take up what's in the soil.
All right, excellent. Thanks, John. Well, if you are looking for some structure and texture around your home, look no farther than one of the ornamental grasses that really love to grow in Nebraska. There are lots of choices and even some colors, but like everything else, you're going to have to keep a few management issues in mind as well. So let's take a look at some of these examples of grasses around our campus. We've done several segments over the years about ornamental grasses in the landscape, but we haven't really talked about what they look like in late summer or early fall. I want to start with some selections or cultivars of our native grasses because these are really spectacular. We have a couple of different blue stems, little blue stems in our garden. This is Blue Heaven, which has a distinctly different character than a newer one, which is called Standing Ovation. We also have Blonde Ambition Blue Grama, which is a very uniform selection of our blue grama. We did have a lot of winter kill in blue grama if it was not in the right conditions this year. So be aware of that as sort of an issue in the landscape. We also have one of our native switchgrasses. The one we have in our rain garden here is Cheyenne Spirit. Low, red, very well behaved thus far, and again, a great ornamental grass addition using native plant material. Annual ornamental grasses can really be a good combination with other annuals because it makes it very easy to manage both of those plants. This is a little bit of an unusual annual ornamental grass, ruby crystals or savanna, with these beautiful pink plumes and a very fine texture. And again, if you're using annual grasses as an ornamental in the landscape, be aware of what they're going to do and how early they're going to do it, whether the seed heads stay on the plant, and whether they can potentially seed themselves and become a little bit of a problem in the landscape. Carl Forster feather reed grass, and this one, which is overdam with a little bit of a variegation in it, is really an old standby in the perennial ornamental grasses world. What it actually contributes is a very early flowering, so the inflorescence in the seed head contributes to the landscape all the way from June into the fall of the year. The maiden grasses or miscanthus have been used in the landscape for a very long time. This one is Morning Light, which has a great texture, very, very late to flower, and a big clump former. Be aware, however, that we are concerned about a lot of the miscanthus now beginning to set seed or spread, becoming pretty aggressive, especially in southern states. They do have a beautiful inflorescence, and again, depending on which selection you get, they're going to flower early, or in the case of this one, may not flower at all. So choose wisely, enjoy those ornamental grasses. Make sure you know whether you're working with an annual, a reliable perennial that stays in a clump or in a vase sort of a shape. Pick on those great ornamentals that are native if you have the right conditions for that. And then understand the management, because at one point during the season, you're going to have to cut them back and you won't have anything to show for it. Once established, those grasses will give you years of enjoyment, especially if you manage them right. Nothing really beats those swaying movements on breezy days. Just know you do have to keep putting some effort into keeping them healthy. You will keep them around for years to come. All right, we do have actually a question, Jody, from Lincoln about fruit flies.
Okay.
In the house, on the peaches he picked from his tree. Where in the world do they come from? He washed them when he brought them in. There was one day and 101 the next day.
Well, yeah, that's how it happens. Fruit flies lay eggs in decaying fruit, and so you just could probably have brought in a lot of eggs too.
And didn't realize
That's
it.
what happens. Yeah, I would do. I would get rid of all the stuff, the sweet, the fermenting things, and put out a fruit fly trap with apple cider vinegar and some soap.
So that's all it is, a little dish of apple cider vinegar and soap.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, Bill, so you mentioned reseeding. It's time to reseed, so I've got to put that in my mind too, because I need to do that. But what is the best mulch, either on a new lawn or on a lawn that is patchy?
Yeah, it's hard to say what's the best mulch, but it's something that you want to be kind of careful with where you're getting your mulch materials from. If you are going to use mulch, then make sure it's not from just like the actual field. Usually our mulches are barley straw. If you do bet down, you don't have to cover it with like feet of straw. You just put a little bit on, about 50% of the soil being covered. But be careful because it can bring a lot of weed seed in. So there are some synthetic materials like pen mulch that are paper-based, and they don't have the weeds. So we actually tested that out this year in our research. Just some different mulches, and we had a lot of noxious weeds came in with the mulch. You spend all this money getting pure, good, tested seed, and then you bring this mulch on, and next thing you know, you got quackgrass everywhere. So that is the last thing you want to do. So make sure you're getting some clean mulch, and if you can't guarantee it, look for some of these synthetics.
All right, thanks, Bill. So kind of quickly, so we can get to our announcements, you guys. We talked about clematis and turning brown. Do they cut it off? This is a David City. Do we cut it off right now, or just wait and see, or bring you a sample and hope for the best?
Well, without really knowing what's going on, it's always best to identify the problem before doing any sort of treatment options. So I would prefer to get a sample before giving any more recommendations.
All right, perfect. So John, we have a viewer who had a whole bunch of hybrid cantaloupe and muskmelon beautiful large melons, but 1 out of 30 was any good. And the rest, they didn't release from the vines.
So I think, variety choice, so think about using a different variety next year. And also, if they didn't release from the vine, then they weren't really completely ripe. And I think I read further on that they rotted, so that could have been like a weather condition that caused them to do that. So do those things.
All right, excellent. So we do have some announcements of fun things going on in the gardening world, and of course we're promoting ourselves. We will be at State Fair on this Wednesday. We will be Q&A 2:30, taping 4 to 5 in the Raising Nebraska building. Come see us, bring us your samples and questions. We also will be on location at Midwest Hops Producers on Wednesday the 12th. Q&A at 5:15, taping 6 to 7 in Plattsmouth, so that'll be a lot of fun as well. And of course, I think we have our Grow Row and our produce donations still going on Tuesdays 5 to 7. Backyard Farmer Garden on East Campus. And I have time for one more question, which is, Jody, since we're not supposed to spray for EAB yet, we wait for who to give us the right information.
Well, you should call us.
Exactly. Call us. There is a statewide task force, and we will all have all of our ducks in a row, all of us, Forest Service, NSA, and everybody else saying, when it's time, yes, we will tell you to spray.